I'm glad to see some new faces and some returning faces in here this morning. Like we said from the beginning, there's Sunday school going on. We're all kind of Zoom fatigue. There's a whole lot going on in the world right now. So whether you're able to come every single week or whether you're joining us sort of later on YouTube or however it is that you're able to connect with this class, our goal is always to be helpful, to be a community of parents figuring it out together. And a reminder that even though the church feels really separate and really far apart when half of us are doing things online, half of us are in person, half of us haven't been on campus since March, that we're still a church and we're still together. We're still doing life alongside each other along the way. So we're gonna continue this morning with we've been watching a series from North Point Community Church talking about parenting in the 21st century. And we're rounding off a video today. Would anyone like to give us sort of like a recap of something they've learned so far, or has anything sort of stuck out to them as we've been talking the past like 2 weeks of this video that we've been splitting up? Would you like for me to give you a refresher of what we talked about last week?
I've really been thinking a lot about the story that Andy shared about his father's reaction to the time when he and his buddy skipped out on church and went to the varsity, and trying to be a father, be a parent like his dad was. I really can't stop thinking about that.
Same. I wouldn't have handled it that way for sure. But maybe now I would.
Wait, so the video, the guy skipped church to go to the varsity in Atlanta?
Yes, and he was Charles Stanley's son, so you can imagine how big that was. And so one of the parishioners told Charles, pulled him aside and said, by the way, your son has been skipping church and going to the varsity. And instead of being embarrassed and, coming down hard on Andy, he got Andy in the car and he said, you know what I told her? And he said, what? And he said, I told her she could parent her own children or something like that. In other words, he chose his relationship with his son over his reputation. And he never missed another day of church because that hit home more than punishment. He said, my dad loves me enough to take up for versus being embarrassed and chastising me. And he said that stuck with him the rest of his life. And I mean, sometimes that's what's important is our relationship with our children and not what other people think of my parenting.
Huh. Yeah, I grew up in Atlanta and our church was right near the varsity, and we would go to the varsity afterwards as a humongous treat. Like we would make it to church, we would always be late, and then we would go to have an early lunch at the varsity. It was just thrilling. It was thrilling.
So Andy Stanley and Louis Giglio are probably in there.
Yeah. So I wonder what church is it? Is
Whatever
it
Charles Stanley?
Well, it's Charles Stanley. It's not First Pres.
No, it's Baptist. It was Baptist.
Baptist? Okay, gotcha. Wow. Yeah, I went to St. Luke's Episcopal Church, which is right downtown near the varsity.
I wasn't even born when he was doing that.
Okay.
That's so funny. Small town. Well, what I'll do is sort of kick us off for this week's clip. So we're watching the tail end, which means we have a little bit of a shorter clip. We've been right around like the 10, 11 minute mark recently. So we're hitting an 8-minute today, which maybe that'll be good. We can get a break from watching things on Zoom. And yeah, we sort of left off last time talking about that relationship and sort of putting your relationship with your kids over your kind of perception of people having on you. And yeah, he comes back with some more great stories to share today. So I hope that this is helpful, and then we'll come back and kind of debrief and talk through it. Just a second to get this going. Okie dokie.
Besides, this might help. Do you know what the number one predictor of relational and professional success is? The number one predictor, not just professional success. And again, as parents, sometimes we get really focused on that. But do you know what the number one predictor of both relational and professional success is? Self-awareness, which is the cousin of emotional intelligence, which results in personal security as opposed to insecurity. And do you know what the number one contributing factor is to a person's security, their EQ, their self-awareness? Their home life. Now, last week I told you that one of the advantages that Sandra and I had was that my job allowed us to get to know some amazing parents, some parents who maintained really great relationships with their kids all the way through middle school and high school and beyond. And one dad in particular, his name was Don, gave me some great advice. Actually, it wasn't advice. He just told me a story about he and his son that I took as advice. And again, you're going to think I'm making this up. This was long before we even had kids. Anyway, his son, also Don, had just graduated from high school and was starting college. And his dad told me about a conversation he had with little Don as he was headed off to school. Now, like most high school graduates, Don, his son, had no idea of what he wanted to do when he grew up. So his father was helping him make the transition. And during the transition, he said to his son, he said, Don, look, whatever you want to do with your life, I'll support you. And I'll use my influence to help you any way I can. But until you know what you want to do, will you trust me to point you in a direction so that you go into college with some sort of direction? And look, the moment you figure out what you want to do, all bets are off. I'll just support you in whatever you want to do. But will you at least take my advice and let me direct you going in, point you in a direction? And his son, Don, said, sure. Now, of course, the fact that his son would take that kind of advice from his dad said a lot about their relationship. Anyway, they were one of the families that we paid close attention to. So he suggested that his son, Don, begin, go to college and pick a business major. And he told him specifically what he thought he should focus on in business school. And he said, you should go into business school with the goal of going to law school based on Don's aptitude and his personality, but not necessarily his interest at the time. So that's what his son did. He went to college, he majored in business, he finished college, he got into law school, and today he's a very successful attorney in the Atlanta area. Now, again, this was before we even had kids. And when he told me that story, I thought, that is such a great approach. You choose, but until you choose, will you trust me to choose for you? So, no lie. 20 years later, my oldest son, Andrew, is headed off to college with no idea of what he wants to do and little idea of what he wants to major in. So I gave him Don's speech. I said, Andrew, will you allow me to point you in a direction until you know what you want to do? And he said, sure. And I suggested he get a finance degree based on, again, his aptitude, but not necessarily his interest at the time. I just felt like that would set him up for a variety of opportunities later on. And I assured him, hey, if you change your mind after your freshman year or you change your mind midstream, no problem. I just want you to go in with a direction in mind. So that's exactly what he did. He stuck with it. He graduated with a finance degree, and right out of college, he landed a great job. Then, after about a year of working there, and some of you know this, he started going to comedy clubs at night. And before long, he was on stage doing comedy for $20 and a burger. And then after a couple of years of that, we had the talk. Not that talk. We'd already had that talk. We had the talk where he said, Dad, I really like my job, but I want to quit my job and do stand-up comedy full time. And I said, Andrew, I did not pay out-of-state tuition for 4 years so you could just throw it all away on some harebrained idea that isn't going to pay the bills. Besides, what are people going to think when they find out that my son... No, I didn't do that. Because my responsibility as his father isn't to decide what he does with his life. My responsibility is to put my weight behind what he decides to do with his life. It's his life. Besides, that was the deal. And honestly, it was pretty easy for me and Sandra because that's the way we'd been parenting all along. It's what we saw other great parents do. But maybe more importantly than that, that was really the way that both of us were parented. If I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times from my dad. Andy, all I expect from you is that you do your best. All I expect is that you do your best. And did I always do my best? No. But I do now. Love is patient. Love is patient. Love is not pushy. Love does not exasperate. Love doesn't drive a wedge. Love doesn't allow ego and reputation to dictate the tone or the pace of the relationship. Love picks up on someone else's natural pace and rhythm and adjusts their pace and rhythm accordingly. And love, because of patience, maintains influence all along the way. Love is patient. So, a couple of questions as we wrap up today's episode. Who feels rushed by you? Who feels unnecessary, maybe even unhealthy pressure when you walk into their room, when you walk through the front door? Who are you driving away in your effort to bring out their best? And what would it look like? You don't have to commit to this, just think about it. What would it look like? What would it require from you to adjust your pace to theirs? And I know for somebody watching today, that scares you to death. But let me tell you what you should fear more: losing a relationship with your child now or your child later. What would it take? What would it look like to adjust your pace to theirs? That's what love, that's what the Jesus brand of love requires of you. It requires us to tame our pride. It requires us to protect our children rather than always trying to protect our reputations. And then there's this. If you live long enough, you're gonna slow down. You're gonna need those around you to adjust their pace to your new pace. It will require patience from those that you love the most and those that you hope love you most. So I hope you raise patient children, children who've seen what it looks like to adjust their pace to the pace of those they love. Just something to think about. And we will pick it up right there next time in part 3 of Parenting in the 21st Century.
I hope there was so much to unpack from that. So we won't I have some questions to guide us if we need it, but I think a good way to start would just be sort of, what's your reaction? What got you thinking during that video?
Well, as always, I think first about the major mistakes that I've made that I wish I'd listened to him before I had children. But one of our oldest child got into the engineering school at Clemson because we made her apply to the engineering school at Clemson. I don't think she even wanted to go to Clemson. Then she decided she would. But when she got in the engineering program, we said, you have to go and be an engineer because you got in. And she said, but I'm not interested in that. And we said, it doesn't matter. You got in. So therefore, you're going to go. And it turned out to be a disaster because she hated it. She cried all the time. She studied all the time. She ended up changing majors. Why we thought that was so important to us, it should be so important to her. And it always brings me back to my middle child, who said from a very early age on that the only thing she ever wanted to do was be a cashier at a grocery store. And for years we fought that, and but we bought her the cashier at home, and she played that and everything, and since then she sort of changed what she wants to do. But she's very bright, and so we told her she needed to be a lawyer or this or that, and I think she just wants to be a school teacher, which is very, very valuable. But the need and the urge to put our expectations and our ideas on our children is just huge. And it's almost like things that we didn't do that we want them to do. But what he says is so important in that we just need to nurture their dreams. And if we don't, they're not going to have a relationship with us. It's going to drive a wedge, which it did for a while with us and our children. So that's really what stuck out to me, is all the things I did wrong.
Well, parenting is a learning process, I think, every day. And you know, it started, you know, we had twins, so I'd never had the luxury of getting to know one child, you know, before the other or anything like that. I mean, they just came right at once. But, you know, immediately upon birth, we found out that Snow had an extra chromosome and had Down syndrome. And immediately that, you know, sent a bunch of questions into my head. And I had a hard time talking to people for a while because I had to do exactly what he said in the video right there at birth, which is change my expectations of what I wanted for, you know, her life, and realizing that her pace was going to be different, and it was going to be a lot different than what I ever knew growing up. And it, from there, we have embraced kind of this slowdown of pace to see what she can become. And I learn more and more and more every day. And we have realized at 11 years old that we probably need to do the same things and the same approach that he talks about with our with our son. But it is challenging to love patiently and to give them a direction and to see what they can become. It's challenging. So I wouldn't say that y'all failed. It's just a learning process every day. And I think every day we get better at it. That's all.
Thank you for that. That's really good.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. I've made plenty of mistakes every day.
I'll weigh in on that a little bit and be a little vulnerable here. I didn't become a counselor until my oldest two were in high school. But anyway, I so recall finding out what these children were interested in early on. You know, what were their gifts? What did I think what did I think they'd be good at? My son, Will, was constantly putting things together and breaking them down, tearing them apart. And I was just, ready to scream. And he had good structural skills and he was always building and this and that. So my mind said, Will, you're going to be a great architect. To that end, I would buy him these children's architectural kits and, you know, had it all set up for him. Well, Will ended up dropping out of high school. So he certainly wasn't going to be an architect. But I'll have to say, I've tried to be patient and loving and supportive, even though his path hasn't always been the path that I would have chosen. But now he is a successful owner of a moving company. And I can see how those structural skills really come into play because he is so great with getting furniture or teaching people that work for him how to, you know, maneuver pieces of furniture up a tricky staircase. So it doesn't always play out. And I've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. But that thing about love and being patient and setting your pace and not having your children try to live out their life based on your own expectations is a good thing to remember.
So I was really, again, not a parent, but I was really struck by what he was saying about his dad told him all the time that all he had to do was do his best. And he sort of admitted, like, of course I didn't do that. Like, of course that wasn't my plan as a child, is to always do my best. But like that expectation that was set for him, he was able to like over time really kind of lean into that. Did that connect with anyone else? Was it just me?
Yeah, no, I liked that. I think I was told always do your best, and I did not. Well, I remember it was different. I mean, my grandfather, I'll never forget this. I told him when I was like in second, third grade, you know, I got 100 on the test, and I'll never forget. He said, "Well, did you have any fun?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I got 100." And he said, "Well, did you have any fun?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "Well, if you didn't have any fun, then it's not worth doing." So, yeah, it was a different perspective, and I've never forgotten it. And I do try to have fun, but that's not what he was saying. You know, it is hard always to do your best and get 100, and it is just as important. What my grandfather, I think, was saying is that it's just as important to connect and with others as it is to do your best.
I like that a lot. I kind of had this very conversation last night with my child because the pressure of school and everything going on, I could hear Stacy's comments last week. She was talking about how, you know, we advance kids so quickly, and we're having them take high school classes when they're in middle school and all these kinds of things. And that is happening here. I've got a 7th grader who's taking Algebra 1 and Spanish, you know, high school credit classes. And I don't know what happened, but suddenly the pressure all came down yesterday, and we had this conversation, and I was saying that very thing. I said, Daddy and I are not worried about the grades. You know, she's worried about the grades. She's worried about this is the first year she won't have all A's and things won't be, you know, just perfect like she thinks they ought to be. And I said, you know, Daddy and I are not worried about that as long as you try hard. And she said, I know, but I am. And that culture of, you know, we got to get the good grades, we got to make 100, we got to keep our all A's or whatever. I mean, I don't know, it suddenly hit hard. So I tried to temper that with the kind of the conversation that Andy Stanley was talking about today, and hopefully got through a little bit. But yeah, and now I'm trying to think, how do we slow down the pace? How do we, you know, if we're already at that point, how do we take away some of that pressure and not let it be so intense with the classes and all those kinds of things? So I don't know, that's something to consider moving forward. But definitely I was grateful for some things I had learned in the video series and comments from other parents and that kind of thing, to consider that conversation and take it slow and hopefully give the right kind of support.
I was just kind of going back to the thing that Snow said a minute ago. But, you know, my kids are older, but my grandchildren are coming along. But whenever, you know, like on Saturdays, you'll run into families and the kids have on their soccer outfits or their little league outfits. And I say, you know, hey, did you have a game today? Yeah, yeah. And I always try to remember not to say, did you win? But did you have a good time? Did you have fun? And if they want to tell me who won or lost, or if they even know who won or lost, that's not important. Just that they had fun and don't have pressure to get a hit or score a basket, or whether they started or didn't start in the game. You know, it's just to have fun. So I was reminded of that from what Snow said, and you end up with a lot more pleasant conversation with them too when you start that way.
Yeah. I think, you know, my husband and I have had conversations. I think having a lot of different interests, maybe that could be a way, Catherine, that could take the pressure off. I don't know. Your children, you have a child that's older than my 11-year-olds, and JP is now at Christ Church and he's in 5th grade. And Nellie, it is getting intense, isn't it? Yeah. So I do see how that does become more intense as you advance through middle school and high school, which I don't know that pressure yet, but I think what we've tried to do with both children is offer different directions of recreational directions and sports directions and church and other things, so that they have varied interests, so that they don't feel like it's just a pressure cooker down one avenue. Yeah, I don't know, maybe that could be something.
Yeah, I know, I agree with that. I think part of the problem is the change in structure of life right now, and that some of the opportunities that normally we would take advantage of, we haven't had, you know, that they're just not there to do. Because one of the comments was, you know, the place I have the most fun is in drama class, which is at the Fine Arts Center, and used to be several days a week, but now is only one day a week because of, you know, making classes smaller and all this kind of stuff. So I thought, you know, trying to tap into some of that kind of stuff, and yeah, use the talents that are there, and let her enjoy her gifts in those ways. So we're going to look for some more outlets for that. But yeah, I think that's a really great point.
I think this also, I know I've been talking about this a lot with just like people at the church and just people in my life, is that we haven't really modeled rest as a group of adults this past year, because a lot of us didn't take our vacations, or we didn't do a lot of the things that we normally would have done to sort of like take time for ourselves and take time for just our general well-being, outside of just like trying to figure out how to continue living in this like very new and bizarre world. But like what I hear y'all saying, Snow and Catherine, is that, you know, we need everybody, all people, regardless of how old you are. You need that outlet, you need a break, you need a chance to just be yourself outside of achievement. We need that as adults, and kids need that as kids. And that maybe this is a time we need to be a little more creative of what that looks like, because, you know, classes aren't happening, the things we do didn't happen. I know summer camp was really hard over the past summer, that not all the summer camps were operating, or there weren't capacity or things like that. I don't know, I'm hearing a good reminder to myself and to kind of those who I'm interacting with, to remind myself and each other to kind of take a break and do the things that we do that don't achieve anything, even if it's just, you know, going for a walk, getting outside, taking a vacation day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You do have to be creative now, but it can be done.
So he closes the video from today with a couple of questions, and they're either, if they're not applying to you, I'm sure they don't hurt at all, but I can see them being the kinds of questions that hurt when you have them directed at you. I'll read them back out so we can kind of be refreshed by them, and you by no means have to share all of them if any of them apply to you. Maybe they're good reflection questions for each of us. So we close the session by saying, who feels rushed by you? Who feels unhealthy pressure when you walk into their room? And what would it look like to adjust your pace to theirs? So you can be as vulnerable as you like, but did those sorts of questions sort of remind you of yourself and the relationships in your household?
Yeah, I definitely wonder who feels rushed when I walk in the room. My work, I add a lot of pressure and intensity, and then my hobbies, I tend to kind of 0 or 100%. And I think about that when he asked that question. I wondered, and I hope that I get some honest feedback.
I think that the kids definitely feel rushed. I don't think they feel pressured by me, but I think that just makes me think about the mornings before school every day. It's like it's just a fight every morning to get them to do everything they need to do. And then somebody's in tears, and I'm just horrible with patience. So that is one thing that I'm working on. That's been a challenge for sure.
That was a great question, though.
Mm-hmm.
Our middle child for a while said, you know, she would watch me interact with our oldest child, and we have a great relationship and talk. And she said, Mom, I don't call you just to talk or text you because it's very, very stressful when we get on the phone and with you or with Papa, because it's always, what am I doing? It became a call of, what are you doing in school? What do you do? You know, it was like a checklist. And I had to back up and realize that relationship was more important than what the to-do list that she was supposed to be doing, and where I saw all of her failures. And it completely changed the dynamic. And she calls me all the time now just to talk. And then I can add in, how is your paper coming, or how is this coming? But I have to be really cognizant of the relationship over, because we're always rushed. So I just want to know, check. And the relationship is so much more important. So sometimes your kids will just completely call you out on it. And when they get older and say, I don't want to talk to you because you do stress me out. So, and the little ones, the morning time, I mean, having a tween, I mean, it's like pulling teeth, and trying to be cognizant of the fact that they're really tired in the morning. And anyway, that's a struggle. That's a struggle, because you don't want to send them off to school in that horrible screaming mode or just aggravated mode. So that's something I think we can all work on as parents. It's just hard.
It is hard.
Mm-hmm.
James?
Lauren, I read some kind of article one time anyway. It said, if you pray for patience, you may get it, but you may get many opportunities to use that gift.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist in the abstract. You don't know
Yes.
you have to use it.
We have talked about that before. So we're like, maybe we shouldn't pray for patience.
Whatever.
That's true.
I'll tell y'all one thing, and this is kind of following up on what Elizabeth said, but I have a very good relationship with my mother now. She's 90, almost 91. But for many years in my young adult life, I kind of just kept a communication distance with my mother, even though she lived in Greenville, and did a lot of things for me, and babysat my children and all these things, because I always felt like she was judging me or criticizing me, or making me explain myself, for decisions I made when I was already an adult and didn't need to be explaining or justifying things I did and said. And so it really can cause a rift. It wasn't a known rift. It was just something that I lost the advantage to have the relationship with my mother, and consequently with my father, because he didn't do those things, but he lived with my mother. And so I just, went several decades with a very lukewarm relationship with them that didn't go very deep. It wasn't ugly or angry. It just was arm's length. And it's kind of like what Elizabeth, I think, was saying, that I kind of felt like I needed to keep my own company, for fear of being judged.
Right out of college, I read that book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I really didn't actually read it. I just listened to it on tape. But back when you had a tape recorder. Yeah, those are a thing of the past. But anyway, the one part that stuck out to me, and I can't remember any of the rest of the book, but one habit of highly effective people is that you should not be around anybody who uses the word should. Anybody who uses the word should is really just, it demeans the other person. And had a heart to heart with my mom, because I said, you know, you every conversation I have with you, you use the word should, like not once, but maybe 1,000 times in our small 5-minute conversation. And this book is telling me that I should not be around you anymore. And she laughs, and I do call her out on it now, many years later, after, I mean, I'm in my late 40s now, and yeah, and it is a good reminder, you know, that what he said, you know, to give a direction until someone knows what they want to do, you know, until the child knows what he wants to do. I think that's very interesting, because the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People says you should not surround yourself with anybody who's telling you what you should and should not do.
Well, I'm going to cut us off for time, but I'm really glad that we've had this conversation. I think I've learned things. I hope you all have also learned things. We will pick up next week, same Zoom link, with a new part 3 from his Sunday school series. And we've been at the very beginning of that 1 Corinthians passage. It starts with love is patient and then keeps going for quite a while. We've really been sitting on the love is patient one for like 3 weeks now. So I promise the next week he'll move into love is kind and all sorts of other things that I think we can learn a lot from.
Let me add one thing. I do love my mom, and I do talk to her, even though she still uses the word should. It's hard for all parents to quit using the word should, but it's a good reminder. All right, I'm sorry, I had to end with that.
No, you're fine. We'll take the caveat. Yeah. Reminder that this Tuesday is Shrove Tuesday. We're having like a drive-through Mardi Gras event, so if you want to make a shoebox float and drop it off, it should be a fun way to participate. We'll have king cake and all sorts of things. So if you're artistic and creative and want to make a little float to have on display, then you can be creative and do that. And if that is overwhelming and that's one too many things to add to your plate, then just come drive through and get some king cake and be festive and fun. That means that Ash Wednesday is this Wednesday. So there's services at the start of the day, midday, and in the evening. In person, we'll have some online offerings too. So if you're looking for a way to get plugged in for Ash Wednesday, just sort of put that on your calendar. That's happening this week at the church. And other than that, then I will hopefully see as many of you as possible back on Zoom on Sunday. Would anyone like to close us in prayer? I'm always happy to, but I'll do it. The Lord be with you. God, I thank you for the opportunity to be together. I thank you for this community of parents trying to figure it all out. I thank you that we are not placed on this earth alone, but that we are placed on this earth in community to be with each other and to be the people made in your image, who are directed by you and loved by you and guided by you. I thank you that you have the Holy Spirit that dwells within each and every one of us to help guide us and shape us and mold us into the people you call us to be. And I pray that as we go throughout this week, that we would keep you ever on our hearts and feel your presence in the highs and the lows of each of our days. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Well, I'll see you all next week. Thanks again for the conversation. Stay dry. Happy Valentine's Day. And I'll see you next week.